Florine Baumbach is a peace and conflict researcher who completed a master's degree in peace and conflict management studies at the University of Haifa in 2016. Her academic work focuses on how nonviolent, self-organized communities, particularly anarchist and intentional groups like the Rainbow Family, can function as informal agents of conflict transformation. Through ethnographic fieldwork and qualitative research, she explores themes of governance without hierarchy, consensus decision-making, and the relationship between individual transformation and collective peacebuilding. Baumbach's approach combines academic rigor with participatory observation, reflecting both scholarly analysis and genuine engagement with alternative social movements. This 2016 master's thesis looks at the Rainbow Family, temporary, money-free gatherings where people camp together and try to live cooperatively, and asks how well they prevent and handle conflict without formal leaders. Based on fieldwork at a large 2014 gathering in Hungary and a smaller one in Israel, it finds the community uses consensus meetings, rotating focalizers who coordinate tasks, and simple practices like talking circles and active listening to keep the peace. These methods often work, but the thesis also notes recurring problems. Informal hierarchies still emerge, rules are unevenly enforced, some conflicts get avoided rather than solved, and elements of cultural appropriation and privilege show up. Overall, the gatherings don't create a perfect peaceful society, but they function as hands-on learning spaces where participants practice nonviolent cooperation, and then take some of those habits back into everyday life. In the introduction, Baumbach explains that her study explores how the Rainbow Family, an international network of people who gather in nature to live simply and peacefully, might serve as an example of nonviolent conflict transformation. Although these gatherings are not formally focused on conflict resolution, they aim to build community without hierarchy, money, or authority, emphasizing cooperation, respect, and peace. Baumbach uses this setting to examine whether such anarchist-style communities can manage disagreements and maintain harmony without traditional leadership or rules. She introduces her plan to connect theories of conflict transformation, anarchism, and intentional communities, and to use the Rainbow Family as a real-world case study to see how people can practice peace in everyday life. In the literature review, Florine Baumbach connects three main ideas: conflict transformation, anarchism, and intentional communities, to build the foundation for her study. She first explains conflict transformation as a peace approach that goes beyond just stopping fights. It aims to change the social structures and relationships that cause conflict, promoting equality, participation, and non-violence. She then discusses anarchism, not as chaos, but as a philosophy that values freedom, cooperation, and organizing society without coercive authority. Next, she explores intentional communities, groups of people who deliberately live together based on shared values, as real-life experiments in these ideas. By combining anarchism's non-hierarchical ideals with conflict transformation's focus on peaceful change, she proposes that anarchist intentional communities like the Rainbow Family might act as informal examples of how ordinary people can practice conflict transformation. The section concludes by outlining her research question and sub-questions, which guide her case study of how the Rainbow Family handles conflict, leadership, and peacebuilding in daily practice. In the methodology section, Baumbach explains how she designed and carried out her research on the Rainbow Family. She used a qualitative approach, which focuses on observing and understanding people's real-life experiences rather than measuring things with numbers. Her main method was ethnographic fieldwork, living among participants, talking with them, and watching how they organized and solved problems. The case study focused on two gatherings: the World Rainbow Gathering in Hungary and the Israeli National Gathering, both held in 2014, chosen for their contrasting sizes and cultural diversity. She collected data through interviews, informal conversations, and participant observation, recording her impressions and maintaining detailed notes. For data analysis, she identified recurring themes and patterns related to leadership, conflict, and community behavior. To ensure quality, she emphasized transparency, consistency, and reflection throughout the process, keeping an audit trail of her decisions. Finally, she discusses ethics, noting her efforts to protect participants' privacy, gain informed consent, and conduct the study with respect for the community's values and trust. In Conflict Transformation at Rainbow Gatherings, Florine Baumbach presents her main research findings from studying the rainbow gatherings as real-life examples of how people can live peacefully and manage conflict without formal leaders or institutions. She begins by explaining what a rainbow gathering is: a temporary, non-commercial community where participants live cooperatively in nature, guided by shared values of equality, respect, and nonviolence. Through interviews and observation, she finds the participants see the gatherings as small-scale experiments in building a peaceful society. The community uses informal governance methods like consensus decision-making, rotating roles, focalizers, and talking circles to maintain harmony and handle disagreements. While these approaches often succeed in promoting cooperation and inclusion, Baumbach also observes recurring challenges such as uneven participation, hidden hierarchies, avoidance of conflict, and cultural or social biases. Despite these flaws, she concludes that the gatherings embody many of the principles of conflict transformation. They serve as learning spaces where people practice empathy, active listening, and shared responsibility, and then bring those experiences back into their everyday lives. In What is a Rainbow Gathering?, Baumbach describes what a rainbow gathering is and how it works in practice. A rainbow gathering is a temporary community where people from around the world come together, usually for about a month, to live cooperatively in nature, without money, leaders, or formal organization. Everything, from cooking and cleaning to decision-making, is done collectively through voluntary participation. Gatherings are intentionally non-commercial. Instead of tickets or sales, meals are supported by donations to a magic hat. Baumbach explains that participants see the gatherings not as festivals but as experiments in peaceful, egalitarian living. They aim to create a space based on respect, simplicity, and connection with others and the environment. Although gatherings are decentralized and open to everyone, this informality makes them complex social experiments, balancing freedom, responsibility, and community cooperation in the absence of formal rules or hierarchy. In A Vision of a Peaceful Future, Florine Baumbach explores how rainbow family participants imagine and define a peaceful society. Through interviews, she finds that most participants view peace not simply as the absence of violence, but as a way of living rooted in respect, equality, love, and cooperation among all people and with nature. They believe that real peace requires both personal and social transformation. Individuals must learn empathy, patience, and mindfulness, while communities must move away from competition and domination toward shared responsibility and inclusiveness. Many participants see the rainbow gatherings as small-scale examples of what a peaceful world could look like, even if imperfect. While they acknowledge that achieving such peace on a global level would require major cultural change, they remain optimistic that gatherings like these can inspire that process by showing people that alternative, more harmonious ways of living together are possible. In Rainbow Structure and Governance, Baumbach explains how the rainbow gatherings organize themselves without formal leaders or hierarchies. She finds that, despite the lack of official structure, the community relies on shared leadership and cooperative decision-making to function. Tasks such as cooking, cleaning, and maintaining facilities are coordinated by volunteers known as focalizers, whose roles are open to anyone and often rotate among participants. Decisions are made through consensus, meaning everyone can voice opinions until a collective agreement is reached. This system is meant to prevent domination and ensure equality, but Baumbach notes that informal hierarchies sometimes still emerge. Experienced or outspoken participants may gain more influence over time. The Rainbow Family's governance model values flexibility, transparency, and mutual accountability, aiming to create a peaceful and self-organized community. However, the same informality that allows freedom can also lead to disorganization, uneven participation, and reliance on a few motivated individuals to keep things running. In A Rainbow Peace Culture, Florine Baumbach describes the peace culture that sustains social order and unity within the rainbow gatherings. Instead of relying on rules or authority, the community maintains harmony through shared values, identity, and ritualized practices that encourage empathy, cooperation, and mutual care. Gatherings promote what participants call peaceful diversity, where differences in beliefs, cultures, and lifestyles are welcomed as sources of learning rather than division. Everyday rituals, such as communal meals, talking circles, and collective singing, help reinforce a sense of belonging and equality. Baumbach links this to the idea of a peace culture developed by peace theorist Elise Boulding, where relationships are based on compassion and respect rather than dominance. However, Baumbach also observes tensions beneath the surface. Despite the ideal of inclusiveness, subtle inequalities based on experience, confidence, or social privilege still appear. Overall, the Rainbow family's peace culture works not through strict control, but through shared commitment to living peacefully, which fosters both community cohesion and individual transformation. In Conflict, Violence and Direct Peace at Rainbow Gatherings, Baumbach examines how the Rainbow family understands and manages conflict and violence within its gatherings. She finds that disagreements and tensions are common, but they are generally handled through nonviolent, community-based methods rather than punishment or exclusion. When someone breaks a rule or behaves disruptively, others typically respond by talking with them, explaining why their actions are problematic, and trying to reintegrate them into the group. If issues persist, larger talking circles are formed where everyone can speak and decisions are made by consensus. These methods reflect the community's goal of transforming conflict into understanding rather than suppressing it. Physical violence is rare and usually met with calm intervention from bystanders who prioritize safety and empathy. However, Baumbach notes that this informal, non-coercive approach can sometimes lead to tolerance of harmful behavior or avoidance of serious problems. Despite these challenges, she concludes that the Rainbow gatherings demonstrate a strong commitment to direct peace, the everyday practice of kindness, patience, and non-violence as the foundation of community life. In Rainbow gatherings as spaces for transformative peace education, Florine Baumbach argues that Rainbow gatherings function as informal schools for peace, where participants learn by living together in cooperative and non-violent ways. She explains that people at the gatherings develop practical skills in empathy, communication, conflict resolution, and community building through daily experience rather than formal teaching. The gatherings serve as what peace scholars call transformative peace education, a setting where learning happens through action, shared responsibility, and reflection. Participants practice active listening, patience, and mutual care, which can change how they view themselves and others. Many describe these experiences as deeply personal, helping them grow emotionally and spiritually while learning to relate peacefully. Baumbach highlights that this process empowers individuals to take what they learn back into their everyday lives, spreading small-scale social change. Although the Rainbow family faces ongoing challenges in consistency and inclusivity, it still provides a living example of how people can educate themselves and others toward a more peaceful and compassionate way of being. In Inside and Outside, Rainbow Relations with the Society, Baumbach explores how the Rainbow family views and interacts with the outside world, often referred to by participants as Babylon. She explains that many Rainbow members see mainstream society as materialistic, disconnected, and driven by competition, while the gatherings represent an alternative based on simplicity, cooperation, and emotional openness. However, Baumbach points out that this sense of separation is complicated. The Rainbow family is not truly independent from society, since participants come from it, depend on its resources, and eventually return to it after the gatherings. Some participants risk adopting a sense of moral superiority or escapism, believing they have transcended society's problems, which can limit their ability to create real-world change. Others recognize that transformation must involve engagement with the wider world, not isolation from it. Baumbach concludes that while the Rainbow family provides a temporary refuge from mainstream pressures, its true value lies in helping individuals reflect on those systems and inspiring them to bring more peaceful and compassionate attitudes back into everyday social life. In Purpose and Impact of the Rainbow, The Insider's Perspective, Florine Baumbach presents how members of the Rainbow family themselves understand the purpose and wider impact of their gatherings. Participants generally see the Rainbow not as a movement trying to change the world directly, but as a space where people can personally experience and practice peace, love, and cooperation. They believe that transformation begins with the individual, by learning to live peacefully with others, Each person can carry those values back into society and influence change in small but meaningful ways. Many describe the gatherings as both a spiritual and practical experiment, offering a glimpse of how humans might coexist more harmoniously. While the rainbow model is not perfect or scalable to society at large, Baumbach notes that its power lies in its ability to inspire awareness, compassion, and responsibility among those who participate. From the insider's view, the rainbow's mission is to be the change you want to see in the world, showing that peace can grow from personal example rather than formal systems or political action. The thesis wraps up by saying rainbow gatherings can and do create unusually peaceful, cooperative environments, but not perfectly, and not all the time. The community's ideals of equality, nonviolence, and consensus are visible in practice, yet participants often struggle to fully live up to them. Old habits and subtle hierarchies sometimes reappear, and some conflicts are sidestepped rather than solved. Even so, the gatherings routinely reach a high bar of day-to-day peacefulness given their informality and scale, which is a meaningful result in itself. The author is explicit that rainbow is not a plug-and-play model for society. It's temporary, imperfect, and not scalable as is. Its real value is cultural. It offers a vivid counterexample that can shift mindsets, inspire participants, and spark small, practical changes people carry back to their families, workplaces, and communities. In that sense, rainbow's impact is indirect but real, more about planting seeds than building finished systems. Because of this, the thesis argues that rainbow should be seen as a partner to formal peacework, not a substitute for it. The community's strengths lie in introducing non-hierarchical values and practices to many people, and serving as a training ground for cooperation and conflict skills. Its weaknesses, recurring dominance patterns, uneven participation, and limited follow-through, could be mitigated with more conscious reflection, explicit education, and capacity building at the gatherings themselves. Stepping back, the conclusion recommends that conflict transformation practitioners take movements like rainbow seriously as informal allies. While they can't deliver a complete blueprint for peaceful societies, they operate as accessible, low-cost, networked spaces of transformative peace education that have engaged large numbers of people over decades. In short, they function as living workshops where people practice cooperative norms and then export them outward, an effect worth recognizing, supporting, and learning from. The 2014 World Rainbow Gathering in Hungary took place in September and ran about a month. It drew a large international crowd, up to roughly 1,500 people, making it one of the author's two core field sites. The other was a smaller national gathering in Israel later that year. The researcher spent 28 days on site in Hungary, observing daily life, governance, and conflict practices. The Hungarian site was remote and fully outdoors. The gathering was intentionally non-commercial. There were no tickets or sales. Communal meals were funded by passing the magic hat for voluntary donations. Work was voluntary and collective. Kitchens, water, sanitation, and other infrastructure were built and maintained by whoever showed up to help. The setting echoed the official invitation to the World Rainbow Gathering Hungary 2014, which framed the space around tolerance, openness, non-violence, non-commercialism, and reconnection with nature. Orientation for newcomers was handled at a welcome center. There, and through signs and mealtime announcements, basic norms were explained, why certain behaviors, for example, bringing alcohol or meat into the main circle, were discouraged, and where personal freedom and community comfort were meant to balance. These rules were enforced lightly and situationally. The main circle was treated as the commons where norms mattered most, while individual camps were regarded as more private. When people crossed lines, the first response was almost always a conversation to explain the why behind a norm, and to try to bring the person back into cooperative participation. Decision-making and coordination were handled through consensus, talking circles, and rotating focalizers, volunteers who temporarily took responsibility for key tasks like kitchens, sanitation, or water. Roles were open, fluid, and meant to be shared and passed along. The intent was to avoid fixed hierarchies while still getting complex work done for a large camp in the forest. In practice, regulars and the more experienced often became informal reference points others relied on, because continuity helped complex systems run, but access to roles remained open. One of the clearest scenes from the Hungarian gathering involved the nearby Roma community. Villagers from a settlement close to the site came to the camp to ask for money and food. Many Rainbow participants gave food, yet the moment revealed a social gap the community otherwise tried to transcend. People appeared uncomfortable and unsure, suddenly face to face with their own relative privilege. The thesis identifies this as a sobering reality check, amid the gathering's romantic egalitarian ideals, and it places that moment alongside the work's broader critique of cultural appropriation and unexamined privilege that can surface in Rainbow spaces. The researcher attended the Israeli National Gathering for about 15 days in November 2014. She chose it as a contrast to the larger World Gathering in Hungary. The Israeli camp was smaller, drew fewer international participants, and had a more regional feel, her words, which made it useful for comparing dynamics across scale and cultural mix. One scene she records from that camp captures how enduring conflicts were talked about on the ground. In an informal group conversation dated the 10th of November 2014, participants discussed the long-running dog problem. The point someone made was blunt. This is an issue that can't be definitively solved. It has been argued about for 30-plus years and will be argued about in the future. The practical takeaway was to stay with it, accept that some conflicts are permanent features of the landscape and focus on case-by-case ways of living with them, rather than chasing a once-and-for-all fix. This conversation exemplified the gathering's conflict ethos: acknowledge uncertainty and keep working the problem together, without force, as situations arise.